What if the shadows hiding in forgotten corners aren't just figments of imagination but echoes of a terrible truth? Tonight, you'll step inside the cold walls of Ashwood Orphanage one last time. You'll uncover secrets buried for over a century, secrets that still haunt every creak, every whisper, every mirror. But beware, some doors that once opened can never be closed. Are you ready to face what lies beneath? Because this story is far from over. The new arrival. The rain had been falling for hours. Thick sheets of it poured from the gray sky, turning the dirt road into a muddy stream that a lone black car made its way up the hill, its tires groaning against the soaked earth. That I in the back seat sat a quiet, pale-faced boy named Elias, clutching a worn-out stuffed bear with button eyes. He didn't speak. He hadn't since the fire. The driver, a social worker with a tired expression and nicotine-stained fingers, glanced at the boy in the rearview mirror, but didn't say much. Either. The air was thick with something unspoken like grief. Trying to wear a mask of routine, at the top of the hill stood Ashwood Orphanage, a crumbling stone building with tall, narrow windows like watching eyes. Moss crawled up its walls, crows perched on its gutters. Unmoving even in the rain, it looked less like a home and more like something that had survived being forgotten. Elias stepped out of the car, his shoes sinking slightly into the mud. The wind tugged at his jacket. He looked up. Something about the place felt wrong, like the ground beneath it breathed. Inside, the orphanage was dim, lit only by flickering wall lamps and a few candles. The walls were yellowed with age, and the floor creaked like it resented being stepped on. That a tall, thin woman appeared at the entrance. Her name was Matron Calloway, though the children simply called her the Crow. Her eyes were sharp black and unblinking. Her hands were too long for her body. "You're late," she said to the social worker, who only nodded and handed over a clipboard. No introductions, no warmth, just a signature and a shrug. Calloway knelt not out of kindness, but calculation. She studied Elias like he was an object at an auction. "You'll sleep in the East Wing," she said coldly. "Third floor, room 313. The social worker didn't stay. He got in his car and drove off without looking back. That night, Elias was shown to his room. The hallway was long and dark, the wallpaper peeled like dead skin, and all the doors looked the same plain wood, except for the small brass numbers above the frames. Room 313. The door creaked open by itself. Inside was a bed, a small desk, and a broken clock on the wall that ticked even though its hands never moved. The window was barred. The closet was locked. The air smelled faintly of burned hair and something metallic. The boy was already there. Noah, he didn't smile when Elias entered. He simply said, "You got this room too, huh?" Elias nodded. Noah leaned closer and whispered, "Don't talk to the mirror after midnight. And if you hear knocking from the closet, don't answer ever." Elias blinked, confused, but Noah had already turned over and pulled the blanket over his head. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling the window bars. The broken clock still ticked. And then it started tap, 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 from the closet. Point three knocks, slow, precise. Elias sat up in bed, clutching his bear. His heart pounded. He looked at Noah, but Noah was gone. The bed beside him was empty, sheets cold. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks came again. He tried to run to the door, but it wouldn't open. The handle turned, but the door stayed shut, like something on the other side was holding it. Closed, he backed away. The closet door slowly creaked open, though no one touched it. It was pitch black inside. The whisper slid out of it like smoke. You shouldn't be here." Morning came. The sun was pale and distant. The closet was closed again. Noah was in his bed, fast asleep or pretending to be. When Elias asked him what happened, Noah said, "What are you talking about? I never left my bed." Elias didn't argue, he just looked over at the closet. The brass handle was covered in tiny fingerprints, child-sized. Later that day, during lunch in the dusty dining hall, Elias noticed something else. The other children wouldn't sit near the walls. They all huddled in the middle of the room. And one touched the soup. They didn't speak unless Matron Calloway was nearby, and even then, only in whispers. Elias finally asked one of the girls, a thin, nervous child with mismatched socks, "Why is everyone so scared?" She looked at him, her eyes wide. "Because some of us don't come back that night." Room 313 was colder than usual. Noah didn't speak. The ticking clock still ticked without moving to IT 12:03 a.m. The mirror on the wall fogged up from the inside, and on the glass, drawn by an unseen hand, were 3 words: "Let me out." The locked room. The message was still there the next morning. "Let me out," written in fog on the inside of the mirror. But when Elias called for Matron Calloway, and she arrived eyes sharp and mouth thin, the message was gone. The glass was cleaned, and no condensation, and no writing. Just a perfectly normal, cracked mirror above the desk. She looked at Elias for a long time and said coldly, "Some children dream things they shouldn't." Then she turned and left, her heels tapping like nails on stone. Later that day, Elias sat outside on the overgrown steps of the East Wing, watching the fog creep across the woods beyond the hill. The other children played, but none of them smiled and no laughter, only careful glances, like they were waiting for something or hiding from it. Noah sat beside him, chewing at a splinter in his thumb. "You saw the mirror, didn't you?" he said. Elias nodded. "It fogged up to something wrote on it." Noah stared out at the woods. "That mirror used to belong to room 314. Elias blinked. "There's no room 314. Noah smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Exactly. That night, after lights out, the hallway was quieter than usual, too quiet. Elias couldn't sleep. The broken clock still ticked. The air felt colder, heavier, like something invisible stood just above the bed. Watching, he got up, tiptoed out into the hallway, and stared at the row of doors. Rooms 308, 309, 310. Room 313, his room. And then, nothing. Where room 314 should have been was just a blank wall. But he noticed something. The wall between 313 and 315, that was wider than the others, much wider, like it was hiding something. He ran his hand along the wall, and then he saw it, a tiny line in the paint, a faint outline, like a door had been sealed shut and painted over. The brass number had been scraped off, but someone a long time ago had carved 3 letters just above the place where the doorknob should have been DLI. He stepped back. His name. No, not his name. Just the first 3 letters, Eliza. The next day, Elias cornered Noah behind the chapel. When no one else went, the place smelled of mildew and dust, and the crucifix on the wall had a crack running straight through Christ's face. "Who's Eliza?" Elias whispered. Noah looked pale. "She was a girl who lived here before any of us, a long time ago. They say she was strange, talked to herself, drew pictures of things no one else could see. The other kids teased her point one day. She vanished." Elias swallowed. "Vanished." Matron Calloway told everyone she was adopted. But that's a lie. Kids here don't get adopted. They just disappear. Elias shivered. "And room 314? Noah nodded. It was hers. After she vanished, they sealed it up, said it was cursed, said anyone who slept there started tearing her. That night, Elias dreamed he was standing in the hallway again. Outside room 313, the hallway stretched forever, the ceiling dripping black water. The air buzzed with whispers too many to count. He turned. Where the sealed wall had been, that was a door. The brass number gleamed .314. And slowly, the door began to open. From the darkness inside came a small hand pail, bony, reaching toward him. "Elias," a voice whispered. "Please, help me." He woke up in a cold sweat. The mirror was fogged again. This time, the words were different. "Open the door." Elias couldn't take it anymore. That afternoon, during free time, he slipped away and snuck into the east hallway with a butter knife he'd stolen from lunch. He pressed it against the sealed wall, scraping at the paint where the hidden doorknob should be. The paint flaked. The wood underneath was splintered and scratched, like someone on the other side had clawed at it for years. He pressed his ear to the wall. Nothing. Then faintly the sound of singing. A child's voice. A lullaby in a language he didn't know. Then a knock from inside the wall. Once, twice, 3 times. He stumbled backward, heart hammering, almost screaming. Then he heard it. A voice, soft, right behind him. "You shouldn't be here." It was Matron Calloway. She was standing in the hallway, hands clasped, smile paper thin. "Room 314 is closed, and if you ask about it again, you'll join her." That night, the closet knocked again, but this time It wasn't just knocking. Something came out, a shadow, small, thin, with long, dragging fingers and eyes that glowed faint blue in the dark. Elias couldn't move, couldn't scream. The figure moved toward the sealed wall, room 314, and whispered, "She's almost free." Voices in the walls. Elias didn't sleep for the rest of the night, but he just sat there, knees pulled to his chest, eyes locked on the closet, waiting for the shadow to return. But it didn't. When dawn finally crept through the bars on the window, the room was still. Noah was snoring softly, unaware or pretending, and the wall where room 314 had once stood was silent again. No more knocks, no more lullabies. But Elias knew what had seen. During breakfast, he tried to talk to Noah. He leaned in close and whispered, "There was something in the closet last night." Noah didn't look up. "There's always something in the closet. I think It was her, the girl that Eliza that." Noah paused, his spoon trembling slightly. "You need to stop. If Matron hears you talking like this, she already did." Elias interrupted. Noah's face turned pale. "Then you're already marked." Elias didn't know what that meant, but he was starting to feel it, a weight on his shoulders, a sense of being watched no matter where he went. That afternoon, it started again. Voices, whispers through the walls. Elias had been sitting in the library, a dusty, suffocating room that smelled like mold and secrets. He was pretending to read a children's book when he heard Elias. A faint whisper. He turned. "N01, just shelves, books, and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner." Then again, louder. "Come find me." It was coming from inside the wall. He placed his ear against the faded wallpaper and froze. There were footsteps inside. Small, bare, running down the hollow cavity between the rooms. Then laughter. A girl's laughter. Soft and broken. He stumbled back, heart racing. The librarian, a hunched, nearly blind old man who smelled of ink, looked up and muttered, "Keep it down in there." Elias wanted to scream, but instead, he left the library fast. That night, Elias woke up at exactly 3:14 a.m. The clock hadn't worked for weeks, but it was glowing, and ticking. .3:14. He turned to Noah's bed. Empty again, a trail of muddy footprints led from the bed to the hallway. Elias followed them. The corridor was suffocatingly dark. The air smelled of wet stone and dust. Elias walked barefoot, shivering, feeling every warped plank beneath his feet. The footprints led him to the sealed wall. Room 314. But this time it was open. The wall had cracked apart like it was. Rotting from the inside, a jagged doorway now stood where the wall had been, with splinters framing the pitch-black interior. Elias stepped inside. The room was cold, colder than death. The wallpaper was torn, revealing names scratched into the wood beneath over and over again. Eliza, Eliza, Eliza. A child's drawings were scattered across the floor-stick figures, all of them standing near the orphanage point one by one. The heads were crossed out in red crayon, and in the center of the room, was a mirror. The same kind as in room 313. But this one was shattered. The pieces floated in midair, frozen in time, and reflected not Elias, but something else, a girl. Standing behind him, he spun around, nothing. But in the reflection still she stood there, face pale, eyes hollow, lips moving silently. And then she turned and pointed to the floor. Elias looked down. The wooden boards beneath his feet were stained black. There was a metal ring embedded between two planks like a handle. A trapdoor. He bent down and pulled. The wood groaned, resisting, then suddenly it gave. A hole gaped open in the floor, black as pitch. Cold wind rose from below, carrying the smell of earth and old bones. And then he heard it again, the voices, hundreds of whispers, all around him, all through the walls, sobbing, screaming, pleading. Let us out, that she's still here. She won't let go. Elias clutched the edge of the mirror, his breath fogged. Up the shards, and the message wrote itself once more, across the floating glass. You heard US. Now she knows. He slammed the trapdoor shut and ran. But the mirror shards didn't fall. They just hovered there watching. When Elias burst back into room 313, Noah was waiting awake, sweating. I saw it, Elias gasped. I went inside. Room 314, it's real. There's something under the floor. Noah looked at him, his face pale, eyes wide. You opened it? Elias nodded. Noah didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, Then it's too late now. That night, the whispers didn't stop. They got louder. Children crying, doors slamming, screams in the vents, and beneath them all one voice, soft, calm, singing a lullaby, the voice of a girl who had never left. The shadow behind the mirror. The mirror in room 313 had changed. It no longer reflected Elias, not completely. When he stood in front of it now, the image he saw stared back with dead eyes hollow, sunken in a faint, unnatural smile that didn't match the fear on his real face. It was him, and not him. Behind his reflection stood a shape, a figure that didn't exist in the real room, a girl with stringy black hair and a tattered nightgown. She hovered just beyond his shoulder, unmoving, her face blurred, like a memory trying to rot. Itself, he blinked and the girl vanished from the reflection, but not from the room. That day, the weather turned. Thunder rolled across the sky like growls from something ancient and hungry. Rain lashed against the barred windows. The power flickered. The air in the orphanage grew thick, damp, and stifling. It felt like the building was holding its breath. Matron Calloway had locked the children inside their rooms for their safety. But Elias knew the real reason. Something was coming. He spent the entire day trying to convince Noah they had to go back into room 314. They needed to open the trapdoor again. They needed to find out what was buried beneath the floor. Noah refused. Last time someone opened that hatch, he whispered, 2 kids disappeared, a brother and sister. Everyone said they ran away. He looked Elias dead in the eye. But I heard them, that I still hear them. They screamed from the vents at night that night. The power went out completely. Candles flickered in the halls. Wind howled through the pipes, like distant screaming. And the mirror in room 313 began to fog from the inside again. Only this time, it didn't stop at writing words. The IT bled. A dark liquid oozed from the corners of the frame, thick, slow, like oil or something worse. That IT dripped down the wall in long black streaks. Elias stepped closer, horrified. Behind the mirror, something moved, a shadow, pressed against the glass like it was trying to crawl through. Its hand, pale, skeletal, slammed against the inside. Bang! Elias stumbled backward. The mirror cracked slightly, just a single jagged line across the surface. He looked over at Noah. Noah was frozen in place, eyes wide, lips trembling. "I can see her," he whispered. "She's in there." And then, all the other mirrors in the orphanage, every single one cracked at once, did a sound like distant thunder. Then silence. Somewhere in the dark hallways, a child screamed. Ignoring Noah's pleas, Elias grabbed a flashlight and crept back down the east corridor. The sealed wall had broken further, exposing more of room 314. The rot had spread like infection, warping the surrounding doors and floors. The mirror shards from before were gone. The trapdoor was still there, still breathing, still whispering. He knelt beside it. The metal handle was ice cold, hands trembling. He opened it. Below was a narrow shaft wooden ladder leading into utter blackness. He climbed down, every rung creaking beneath him. The flashlight flickered. The smell of mold, rust, and something long dead hit him like a wall. When he reached the bottom, he found himself in a buried roommate crawl space sealed beneath the orphanage. Bricks lined the walls. Wooden beams groaned above his head. Water dripped from somewhere, and all around him toys, old, broken toys, dolls with missing eyes, a music box that spun without sound, blocks that spelled nothing, and in the center of the room a circle of children's shoes. Elias stepped closer. There was something lying inside the circle, a book. Thin, leather-bound. He opened it. Inside were names, dozens of them, children's names, each followed by a date, and a word. Vanished, vanished, vanished. Eliza, final entry. Then nothing. The rest of the pages were blank. He flipped to the last page, but there, in fresh ink, was his name, Elias, and below it, in progress. A cold wind blew behind him. He turned slowly, and she was there, Eliza, fully visible for the first time. Her skin was pale and cracked like old porcelain. Her eyes were huge, glassy, and weeping black tears. Her arms hung limply at her sides. Her feet hovered inches off the ground. She didn't speak. She just raised a single, trembling finger and pointed toward the wall. Elias turned his flashlight. Etched into the brick in childlike scrawl were 5 words. She was never the first. Elias screamed. The flashlight died, and from above the sound of 100 mirrors shattering at once. Whispers after lights out. When Elias opened his eyes, he was no longer in the basement. He was back in his bed. Room 313. The flashlight was on the floor. His bear was at his side, and the mirror was whole again. And no cracks, and no blood, and no shadow. It was as if the night before had never happened, except for one thing on the wall. Someone had etched a single phrase into the plaster with fingernails or a knife. "We never sleep." Elias reached out to touch it, and the letters were still damp, fresh. Later that day, Matron Calloway called a General Assembly. The children, stiff, tired, and terrified, were gathered in the main hall. Her voice rang out like ice. Due to recent misbehavior, she said coldly, there will be no more free time after dark, and no movement between rooms, and no visits to the East Wing. Any child found wandering will be dealt with. Her eyes scanned the crowd and stopped on Elias. You are all being watched. A low creaking sound echoed above as if the ceiling itself didn't agree. That night, the orphanage felt wrong, different. The wind didn't blow, the floors didn't creak. Even the rats, usually heard skittering behind the walls, were silent. Elias sat up in bed, unable to sleep. Noah was wide awake too, his blanket clutched in both hands. I heard them last night, he whispered. The other kids, the ones who vanished. What did they say? Elias asked. Noah didn't answer right away. He looked at the mirror, then down at the floor, and finally whispered. They said we're next. The lights went out, but this time there was no knock from the closet at no cracking mirror. Instead, there were whispers everywhere, in the vents, in the walls, under the floor. The voices of children, dozens of them chanting something soft and unintelligible, like a lullaby from a forgotten century. Elias pressed his hands to his ears. It didn't help. They weren't just around him anymore. They were inside. He stumbled out of bed, yanked the door open, and stepped into the hallway. To his surprise, every door on the floor was open, all of them wide open, as if someone had walked down the hallway and knocked gently, and each child had simply obeyed. No sounds no footsteps, just darkness and wind. Then he heard it from down the hall. A laugh, not a child's laugh, Calloway's soft, rehearsed, practiced, and then the sound of something dragging, like fingernails across stone. Elias turned and ran back into the room, but Noah was gone. No sheets, no bed, no pillow, just an imprint on the mattress, still warm, and something written on the mirror. He followed her. Elias ran through the orphanage, searching every hallway, every floor. The place had changed. Corridors, twisted in directions they never had before. Doors that once led to supply rooms now opened to brick walls. The stairwell ended in a dead drop. The paintings on the walls bled from their eyes. And in every mirror, he saw himself slightly off, sometimes older, sometimes dead, sometimes smiling when he wasn't. Finally, he heard it, a humming, Eliza's lullaby, coming from the attic. No one was allowed in the attic, not even Calloway. The stairs were rotting, the air thick with dust and decay. Elias pushed open the attic door, the hinges screeching like something in pain. There, in the center of the attic, lit only by the moonlight through a broken window, was Noah. He stood perfectly still, facing a mirror, an old one, tall, oval, wrapped in black cloth like it had been buried. The cloth had been pulled away. Noah didn't blink, didn't move. Elias crept closer. Noah. No response. He stepped beside his friend and looked into the mirror. But it wasn't them in the reflection. It was a room 314. And inside it, dozens of children stood in a circle, their faces stitched shut, their hands raised, pointing toward the glass. And in the center, Eliza, smiling, whispering. Elias couldn't hear the words, but he felt them in his bones. His nose started to bleed. Noah, we have to go. He grabbed his friend's arm, cold as ice, and yanked him back. Noah blinked, breathed, and then screamed. They ran. Behind them, the mirror cracked. Once, twice, then shattered, sending a wind through the attic that smelled like grave dirt and burnt sugar. They didn't look back. Back in room 313, they locked the door and huddled in silence. For the first time, Noah cried. She tried to pull me in, he whispered. She said we're all hers. She said the mirrors are gates. Elias nodded. We have to break them all. Noah looked up. Shall stop us. Elias stared at the mirror above their desk, now fogged again, and on the glass, 2 new words had appeared. Too late. The night of the scratching. No one slept that night. Not just Elias and Noah, none of the children in Ashwood, because sometime after midnight, as the storm howled across the orphanage's rotting rooftop, the scratching began. Not loud, not violent, but constant. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Slow, methodical. From inside the walls, Elias sat frozen on his bed, the covers up to his chin, his eyes locked on the mirror that it had fogged up again. But this time, no words appeared. Only a single handprint, small, pale. Pressed from the inside, he turned to Noah, who was sitting upright, pale as the moonlight through the barred windows. I think she's trying to get out, Elias whispered. Noah didn't blink. I think she already has. The scratching grew louder. Now it was coming from inside the room, from the closet. Noah's eyes darted toward it. The doorknob was turning, back and forth, slowly, like someone on the other side was trying to figure out how to open it. Then it stopped, and silence returned, until the door scratched, from top to bottom. One long, slow drag of sharp fingernails against the wood. Series H. Elias stood up, trembling. He moved toward the door. No, Noah hissed. Don't open it. Don't you dare open it. But Elias needed to know. He reached for the knob and pulled it. Inside, nothing. Just darkness and the faint smell of mold. He shined a flashlight inside and froze it on the back wall of the closet. Someone had carved rows and rows of tally marks, hundreds of them, and beneath the last row a message. She watches while you sleep. The next morning, the children were different, quieter, more withdrawn, and several of them had scratches down their arms, their necks, their legs. Some blamed each other. Some said it happened in their dreams. Some just stared at the wall, eyes blank, lips trembling. One boy, Theo, sat in the dining hall and refused to blink. When Matron Calloway asked why, he whispered, If I blink, she moves. He blinked once and screamed so hard his voice didn't come back for 3 days. Elias and Noah sat in the library that afternoon, surrounded by books older than memory. They dug through dusty archives, searching for anything about the orphanage's history, and finally they found it, tucked inside a record book from 1872 that Ashwood Children's SNCTR status, closed, reason, unexplained deaths. 12 children, all found in their beds, eyes open, mouths sewn shut, each with deep scratches on their backs from the inside. The orphanage had been shut down for 60 years, until it reopened under a new name, Ashwood Orphanage. Same building, same halls, same mirror-lined rooms. The last name in the old record was familiar, Eliza Merrow. She was listed as unaccounted for, last seen near the east wing. That night, Elias and Noah planned to smash the mirror in room 313. They waited until the orphanage had gone silent, waited until even the whispers quieted. Then Noah lifted a metal pipe head stolen from the boiler room and swung it with all his strength. Crash! The mirror shattered, but it didn't fall. The shards hung in midair like before, and behind the May face, not Eliza, Calloway, watching them, smiling. Suddenly, every mirror in the building screamed a deafening, glass-rattling shriek that knocked Elias to his knees. Blood poured from his nose. His ears rang. He looked up just in time to see the shards begin to reassemble. The mirror was fixing itself from down the hallway. Scratching returned, louder this time, like something was clawing its way toward them, fast. The hallway light bulbs flickered and popped, one by one. Pop, darkness, scratching at the walls, scratching at the ceiling, scratching at their door. Then slam. The door burst open. But nothing stood there, just rows of tiny footprints leading away, and on the wall outside their room, written in blood, "They let her in." The soft hum of rain on the window panes seemed to grow louder as Thomas stood alone in the cold hallway. Behind him, the heavy wooden door of the director's office shut with a click that felt too final. That IT echoed down the corridor, and the hallway suddenly seemed darker than it had moments before. He turned back toward the main staircase and made his way slowly upward. The old wood groaned beneath his feet. Every creak sounded like a sigh, or a whisper. He couldn't decide which. He reached the second floor, where the children's dormitories were located. At the end of the hall, a pale flicker of candlelight escaped from under a slightly open door. That must be the boys' room. As he approached, he heard hushed voices on the other side, but when he pushed the door open, the voices stopped. 7 boys sat upright in their beds, blankets pulled to their chins, their eyes locked on Thomas. "Is this the new one?" a freckled boy asked, his voice barely audible. "Yeah," said another. "Director said he'd be arriving tonight." Third boy, smaller than the rest, with hollow cheeks and wild, curly hair, pointed to the bed in the farthest corner of the room, the only one without sheets. "That's yours," he said flatly. "You sleep alone. Nobody wants to share a bed with that corner." Thomas blinked. "Why not?" No one answered. One of the older boys just looked away and mumbled, "You'll see." He walked slowly to the bed, dragging his suitcase behind him. As he knelt down to unpack, he felt it again. That feeling, like someone was watching him, but not from the room, from beneath the bed. His heart skipped slowly. He lifted the cover and peeked underneath. Nothing, just shadows. Still, something didn't feel right. He climbed into the cold, musty bed and pulled the blanket up to his chin. The other boys whispered amongst themselves, but he couldn't make out the words. The only thing he caught, just before drifting into an uneasy sleep, was a single, whisper-soft sentence from the curly-haired boy. "Don't talk to her if she comes." The first night, though Matt's first night, was anything but peaceful. He dreamed of water-dark, cold water rising slowly up to his neck as he stood frozen in a room with no windows. That a little girl stood across from him, her back turned. Her dress was soaked, clinging to her spine like a second skin. Her head twitched to the side, as though she was trying to hear something. And then she turned. Her face was pale, her eyes black as ink. He woke up choking on air. The room was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that only old buildings knew, where every breath felt borrowed and every shadow had weight. Around him, the other boys were asleep. The only light came from a dying candle on the dresser. Then he heard it tap, 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 soft and deliberate. Not from the window, not from the hallway, but from inside the wall near his bed. Thomas sat upright, the blanket still clutched in his hands. He turned toward the sound. It was coming from behind the dresser. Carefully, he stepped out of bed and tiptoed across the room. The floor moaned. Beneath him, he reached the dresser and gently pushed it aside, revealing something he hadn't noticed before. A small wooden door, barely 2 feet tall, painted the same color as the wall, easy to miss, and no handle, just a small keyhole, rusted over. Another tap, but this time it was followed by a whisper. "Help me." Thomas froze. He backed away, heart hammering, and looked to the other boys. Still sleeping. No one had stirred. Had they heard it? Or was it just in his head? He climbed back into bed and pulled the covers tight. He didn't sleep again that night. Breakfast secrets. The next morning, the dining room smelled of old oatmeal and burnt toast. The boys sat at the long table in silence, their spoons clinking against chipped bowls. Thomas tried to bring up what had heard. There's a little door behind the dresser," he whispered to the boy beside him. Something knocked by swear it whispered the boy Sam. He remembered didn't look up from his food. "You shouldn't have looked." "Why, what is it?" Sam leaned in slightly, his voice low. "They call it the locked room that Anna one talks about. And if the director hears you asking, things happen." Thomas stared. "But why is it there?" Sam finally looked up. His eyes were serious. "That door has been there forever. Longer than the orphanage. The IT wasn't meant to be opened, but sometimes it opens itself." Thomas swallowed hard. "And the girl who whispers?" he asked. Sam didn't answer, but the older boy across the table did, the one who had warned him the night before. "You'll see her," he said, without emotion, soon. As the group gathered in the dining hall for their evening meal, the atmosphere was unusually tense. The children whispered among themselves, casting furtive glances toward Emma. Some of the older kids had heard rumors passed down over the years about children who came to Ashwood and vanished without a trace. Miss Clarice, the head caretaker, rang the old brass bell, silencing the room. She stood at the front of the hall, tall and thin, her skin stretched too tightly over her bones. Her cold blue eyes swept across the children. "We have a new guest among us," she said, her voice clipped and brittle like old glass. "Her name is Emma. She'll need your kindness and your cooperation." But no one smiled. After dinner, Emma was shown to her room. That IT was on the top floor, at the very end of the hallway. As she followed Miss Clarice up the creaking stairs, the shadows seemed to shift around them. The orphanage groaned, as if adjusting to her presence. "This used to be Eliza's room," Clarice muttered under her breath, almost too quiet to hear. Emma paused. "Who's Eliza?" Miss Clarice blinked, then turned with a tight smile. "No one. It's just a name that doesn't matter anymore." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside. Tree branches scraped against the windows like bony fingers. Somewhere deep in the building, a door slammed. Then a soft tapping. She sat up. The sound was coming from the inside of her closet. Tap, tap, tap. She held her breath. Tap, tap. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling, and no answer. Just as she was about to get out of bed, the tapping stopped, and then something else. A soft giggle, high-pitched and distant, that IT echoed through the room, chilling her to the bone. Emma froze, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Then, from under the closet door, a small, shadowy hand slid into the moonlight and slowly withdrew. The final secret. The orphanage was silent, too silent. No creaks, no whispers, no shadows moving just out of sight. Emma stood alone in the main hall, the faded wallpaper peeling around her like ancient skin. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She held the old, leather-bound diary, the one she had found beneath the floorboards of room 314, tight in her trembling hands. IT was the key, the truth. The diary belonged to Eliza Merrow, the girl who had vanished 100 years ago. The girl who still haunted the orphanage. The pages told a story darker than Emma could have imagined. Eliza had not been a victim. She was a prisoner, locked away by the caretakers. For what? For a curse. For a darkness that lived inside her, a shadow born of pain and rage, a darkness that fed on children's fear. Emma flipped to the last page. Her eyes widened. Written in fresh ink was a message addressed to her. "You found me. Now you must choose, stay or join us forever." Suddenly, the air turned icy cold. The lights flickered. From the walls came whispers, not desperate anymore. They were calling, welcoming. "Join us." The shadow stretched from the floor, creeping toward Emma's feet like living smoke. Her heartbeat thundered. She wanted to run, but the door slammed shut behind her. The walls closed in, and from the darkness, Eliza's voice whispered, soft and sad, "We never leave." Outside, the orphanage stood quiet. The rain washed away the footprints in the dirt. The wind carried the secrets of the lost children, and in the distance, a new group of children arrived, waiting for the story to begin again. End of Whispers from the Orphanage. Thank you so much for joining me on this chilling journey through the Ashwood Orphanage. If you felt the whispers, the shadows, and the fear, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that will keep you up at night. And I want to hear from you, what part of the story scared you the most. Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Your voice keeps this mystery alive. Until next time, stay curious, and beware what lurks in the dark.